Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of the AI Spy. I hope all of you are doing very well. In the last episode, we had a discussion with Anis Ahmed. We spoke about breach resilience and how institutions should move beyond shareable data and actually rely on breach resilient authentication systems. If you haven't checked it, please go listen to that. It's a very interesting discussion. There's also some links around blogs that both Anis and I wrote, so that could be helpful. Now, focusing on today. Today, I'm very excited because I'm joined by someone who I've been following for over a year now. He's one of the most insightful people I feel on both on LinkedIn and his newsletter. And he's a man who's puts on many hats. He's been a founder. He has been on the vendor side, a newsletter author, a meme connoisseur, as I would like to call him, because some of the most hilarious memes on LinkedIn that I see around fraud prevention comes from him. And without further much ado, Hen, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Anurag. It's a pleasure being here. And yeah, I guess I can add a few more titles to my name right now.
If if you had to pick one of those, which one would you like people to know you as
A
the
meme
fraud
connoisseur is
strategist or
definitely
the meme
a meme
connoisseur?
connoisseur is definitely a differentiator. Yeah, I don't hear that too
I
often.
there you go. So I think that's what you should go with. So Hen is going to go back after this and update his LinkedIn profile, call himself the. I'm just joking. And again, I'm very excited to have you. I always start my discussion talking about the origin story of our guests. So, how did you find yourself into the world of fraud prevention? How did you discover this domain? Many people tell me they got into fraud prevention by accident, that they had no intention, that they were doing something else, and then fraud prevention found them rather than them finding the domain. Was it your case as well?
Yes. I mean, I don't know if I would call it an accident, but it was definitely not planned or orchestrated in that way. So I started my fraud prevention career when I joined PayPal. That was 2009. I was 27, I want to say, so pretty late in my adult life. But I was actually still in school because I was born and raised in Israel, and obviously we have the military service there. So we start and finish school like university a bit later. And I had a couple of colleagues back from the army days that used to work for this fraud prevention vendor called Fraud Sciences. It was, I think, the first fraud vendor that offered chargeback protection or chargeback guarantee, like Riskified and Forder and Signified and these guys. So it was, I think, the first vendor who did that, and they were sold to PayPal. And these guys, my friends, they were basically investigators, right? They were like on student jobs, doing part-time shifts, and they kept bugging me and arresting me to join them on this startup. And I was actually, like, funnily enough, very much against, like working in a technology company. Technology was definitely not a motivation or inspiration or an interest to me. I was studying history and East Asian studies, so very far away from it. But I basically ran out of money one day and I decided I need a job, and I started the process and got in. And like 10 years afterwards, I found myself, actually not even 10 years, 5 years afterwards, I found myself being the CTO of an AI company. So yeah, that's how life goes sometimes.
It's excellent. Actually, that's a name, fraud sciences, I haven't heard in a long time. I remember reading about fraud sciences first in the book Startup Nation. When I was reading about Israel, the startup nation, fraud sciences was mentioned. And I think the fraud sciences pitch to PayPal was when they go in to pitch to PayPal, they're like, we can save you lots of dollars in fraud prevented. And they're like, oh, well, how are you going to do that? He's like, bad people have something to hide and good people have nothing to hide. That was their pitch. It's an amazing story. If you haven't read the book Startup Nation, also recommend. So,
Absolutely, great recommendation.
so from fraud science, you did your bit there, but then now you are the CTO at Native Risk. Before that, you were the CTO and founder at Frogstar. Now, can you remember in your early days something which you consider an early win and something that you consider as a scar, a lesson learned from your
Yeah.
Frogstar days?
Yeah. Incidentally, it's the same story, right? That's usually the case with startups. But it's the story of our first client. I don't think our first paying client, but our first client for sure. And we actually went live with them very, very early. I think we were really just a couple of months into the actual work on developing the technology and the product, and we were introduced to this client by mutual investors of ours, and they were also at that time, they were a bit further ahead of us in the startup journey, but only slightly. So I think we were kind of like 5 people or so, and they were probably a few dozens. And like we had a couple of very good conversations, and we got along very well with the founders, and we won them very, very fast. Actually, it was a bit of a race to finish building the product and the technology before we had to go live with them. And we went live, I think, like 5 months after we like wrote our first line of code. So it was, considering the space and the technology, it was very, very early on. That was the win part. Obviously, very, very fast. Like both them and us understood that like we are very far from being ready to be, let's say, post-launch. And a lot of the concepts that we had in terms of how our AI would work. Obviously, before you have clients and you have very little data to base your research and your
Right.
trials and simulations on, we didn't have like a very solid idea on how it would look like. Obviously, we were optimistic, as entrepreneurs tend to be.
Yeah.
And we had a bit of data, and obviously when you have a bit of data and you're training AI models, a lot of the times what happens is you overfit the models to have the tiny sliver of data that you do
Yeah.
have. And we did find out that our AI was just not up to par at that time. And we ended up kind of like, I think, continuing the trial period for a few more months until basically the client told us, you're not really ready, so let's talk in a year. And that was, it was within a few months. Like we've seen the full cycle, right? Both winning a client and losing a client, and kind of like understand how technology and product and customer success, all of these play together. So it was definitely a very early lesson.
Right. And I think another thing from your story, what I derive is like the value of having data to train with. You can have the technology, you have the platform, you have the stack, everything's set. But there is the value that data, good data, training data brings that can't be undermined. Now, so you're doing you've done your bit at there you're doing you finish Frogstar, you move on to native risk, and then one day suddenly you think, okay, I'm going to write a newsletter. So how does that come about? Then the inspiration for the newsletter come about?
It's an interesting question, because to me, I don't know, for me it was a very natural process, but I get asked this question quite often. So apparently it's not, maybe it's just natural in my head. But basically I was writing when I first, like when I was starting to think about a newsletter and writing a newsletter, I think I was writing on LinkedIn for about a year and at least 6 months, very, let's say, very consistently. And so I was starting to grow my following, if you can call it that. I was starting to get engagement. People would reach out to me, clients would reach out to me out of my content. But one of the things that I've noticed in my LinkedIn writing, actually two things. The first one was that in the end, it is very, very limited, both in terms of the length that you can go on LinkedIn, but also the depth, because in the end, it's a feed, right? It's not very different than Instagram or Facebook or any other kind of social media. And you need to kind of like, keep it relatively light. So first I was feeling very much constrained and very much like there are some advanced concepts that I want to talk about that just given the intro to these concepts would already be a LinkedIn post on its own. So first, I just didn't feel that LinkedIn can really cover everything that I want to do. And secondly, goes together, I felt like LinkedIn should stay as it is, kind of like more introductionary level, kind of more, let's say, bring or expose my ideas to new followers.
Yeah.
But the newsletter, or not bad, but the newsletter should take that as a next step. It's not a competition. It is actually the next step. If you like my writing on LinkedIn, that was the original idea. Is maybe you'd like to deep dive a bit better. And I think the newsletter is aimed more towards professional. I think it is still quite accessible. I think still, if you're not a fraud
Yeah.
prevention professional, if you're a high level executive in fintech, I think that would very much be a good read for you too. But you need to be curious about it to go into this extra layer.
I think it is very accessible. And I've also recommended people who are not in actively working in fraud prevention. I mean, not in an active role in a fraud prevention team, but have adjacent roles. So if you're on a vendor side and you are, say, in a sales role, I always tell them, read this because it's written in a way that is very accessible. For example, the false positive. That's written in a way, simple mathematics, small table, simple mathematics, $10 loss here, but $100 saved here. Overall, your net, you're actually saving more than you're losing. And the declines, we sometimes make too much about the declines. It's actually not hurting you. So it's written in a way that is very easily read and accessible. And if you're in those other roles, it just improves the depth of your understanding of the field. You can have a better conversation. So you're spot on. And I like that idea about how LinkedIn is, an idea, a basic idea that you're introducing to people. But if you really want to deep dive, let's move to a different platform, maybe a blog or a more detailed newsletter that you can read once a week. So great. You do the newsletter, which I feel is very insightful, goes into details. But the memes. So what does a meme unlock that the newsletter cannot?
I'll say first, it's not going to be a good answer.
Okay.
I found out very early. Actually, I think even like my first post, I used a meme, and I don't even remember why. I think I saw a meme, and yeah, I remember my first post. I remember the meme. I don't even remember what the post was about, but the meme was The Undertaker from like WWE.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think it was something around, how someone brought him down and was celebrating, and the caption said, "When you think you won over fraud, and then you see the Undertaker kind of spring back to life, and everything continues." And I don't know, it was hilarious. Like I really laughed, like seeing it a few times in a row. I laughed, and then it kind of like resonated with the fraud topic, and I just wrote the first post, and I saw that it went very very well, and I kind of like continued doing that, and I continued seeing very good results and very like a lot of compliments about the fact that it differentiates my writing from other people on LinkedIn, at least in the space. And secondly, that it helps grab kind of like a lot of the times help kind of like distill the idea that I'm trying to convey in, a 10-second video. And so I never really questioned my success here. I just kept on rolling with it. Obviously, my process now writing LinkedIn posts is a bit more structured than this meme reminds me of something, but yeah, it still is a main part of my writing.
Excellent. So keep doing that. I really enjoy reading those, coming across those. And honestly, for me, we read so much and we are working in high stress environments. We're working with financial institutions, we're working with fraud. So it's stressful. So when reading something light like this, it actually takes away. And I feel like everybody finds something that is relatable. So the Undertaker one that you said, right? I think we've all been in those situations that we have seen, have conquered the problem, I have solved it, and then it comes back and you're like, "Ah." So it's relatable, and that's why it's so funny. So excellent. I keep in your newsletter recently, one of the newsletters I was reading, it was about stolen identity, that your identity got stolen. Can you explain for someone who has not read that newsletter what that situation was?
Yeah. Well, basically, I woke up one day, I think it was the weekend, Saturday morning. I woke up, and first thing, obviously, I'm checking my mobile phone, and I'm seeing an email from a dating platform congratulating me on the sign up, and that I'm ready to meet, to single and ready to mingle, let's say it like that. And obviously, I didn't drink the night before, and I didn't remember myself signing up to any dating platform. So I started looking into things, and like I quickly realized that someone opened a profile with my name and using my personal email address on this dating platform. And over the next couple of days, I think it went on for at least the emails that I've received. It might have gone on for much more or much longer period of time. But over the next couple of weeks, when I followed it, I saw that this account, after a few days, got frozen. Another account was opened, used like the same identity, same email, again was frozen. Another account, so there were like 3 or 4 accounts that were opened eventually. I couldn't really understand why they used my identity. I don't even know if they used my pictures and, like really personal, like my personal biography in the profile that they've created. But clearly, clearly my picture wasn't used just for the sake of getting better matches, right? Clearly, this was part of a deeper scam operation. And I'm guessing that I'm definitely not the only victim of it, at least not from the identity theft side. So that was basically what I saw. Obviously disconcerting, not the only time I saw something like that, right?
So if you were working at that dating site, or if you had an opportunity to advise them on how to fix that, what was one control that you would recommend?
There are so many. I think that there were a lot of very fundamental failures here. Probably the most kind of like obvious one was if someone is opening an account and you've decided this account needs to be frozen for whatever reason. Great on your part, you've done it in a couple of days, great. Probably managed to contain the damage. But why let the same
Another one.
user open another account with the same identity and the same email? So, and I would assume also with the same device, because if you don't change your email and the name, probably you're not going to bother with changing the device. And this, I mean, for all I know, there can still be an account that is impersonating me out there. So by the way, if you meet me on a dating site, no, it's not me. So yeah, it's a good excuse now that I think about it. Yeah, but yeah, for all I know, they can still be operating out there, and I think that there are so many things that you can do. The basic kind of block lists and making sure that malicious users do not come back without investing some effort into exchanging or refreshing the identity or the devices. That is the bare minimum that I would expect any kind of platform out there to be doing. Definitely a platform that deals with identities.
Yeah, perfect. Now, in staying with the controls, you explained in one of your newsletters about a fraud stack, or a stack of fraud controls. But it wasn't the typical stack or layered controls. When people talk about layered controls, they think of the customer journey and they layer the controls across the customer journey. The way you had stacked it, what I thought was interesting is that you had not stacked it across the journey, but it was more, the stack was designed as, let's start with features, models or model scores, rules, and then manual review. It was an actual stack of controls rather than multiple intervention points across the life cycle. So, am I correct in explaining the stack, and what does a well-balanced stack look like?
Yeah, I'll say first that these two ideas are not mutually exclusive, meaning you can have multiple checkpoints or intervention points throughout the user journey, and you should. And at the same time, you can also have different layers that utilize different technological approaches or methodological approaches to detecting and stopping fraud within the same or a single intervention point. And the way that I see it is that features or data, to me, they are kind of like the base, the foundation. They are not even a layer in the stack that I'm envisioning, because they are just powering it. You are using data to make decisions. The question is, how do you make these decisions? And today we have three main vehicles that deliver, let's say, logics and decisions into these intervention points, into these checkpoints. The first ones are AI and machine learning models. The second one are human or expert-driven rules, also automated. And the third one are manual investigations, manual reviews that humans do themselves. And throughout my career, I've seen and used and bought them all. And each of them has pros and cons, and I would choose to utilize them in different environments and different intervention points. But usually you would have it's almost always better to have at least two of them layering on top of one another in the same intervention point rather than across the user journey. Why? Because what I just said, they all have pros and cons. So the best way to have a more solid defense is to layer your defenses in such a way that the pros are covering for the cons. right? And this you can only do. I always give the same example, and it's so true. I'm a woodworking hobbyist, and I always give the example of a carpenter. If you're a carpenter, you can buy the most expensive saw ever, right? It costs you $1,500, right? It's the most expensive saw ever, but it's not going to help you if you want just to, put a nail through the wall and hang a picture on it. So every problem needs different tools and sometimes sets of tools to solve. And the more tools that you have, and that's basically the message in that newsletter specifically, the more tools you employ together at the same time, the better the result would be.
Right. And you also sometimes talk about the idea of models versus rules. And I think it's not versus, it's models and rules and how you layer them together and use both. So the stack should have both, like you said, when the model, the deficiencies of the model are covered by the rules, the deficiencies of the rule are covered by the model. So they complement each other. It's not the argument of one versus the other.
Absolutely.
Okay, so now I'm going to do something. I've never done this. This is the first time I'm doing this segment. It's called rapid fire. And I'm going to ask you simple. I'm going to ask you a few questions, and without too much delay, without too much thinking, tell me whatever you think about it. Okay? And let me know when you're ready, and we will start.
I hope I'm ready.
All right. So the first question is, what do you think is one overrated fraud threat as of September 2025?
That's a big one. I would say a lot of the deep tech, deep fake threats are many times being used to kind of like scare the industry into buying new products. Specifically, I would say voice cloning is something that I see being, like talked about a lot, and there are definitely cases of voice cloning, don't get me wrong, but like the distance between that and seeing like on scale attacks are, the distance is still quite big.
Right, I completely agree. I actually said that to someone, and they said no, this is that is. So I'm happy that you picked that one. Now, one underrated fraud threat as of September 2025.
Underrated. Yeah, I think that would be a close match between. I'm looking at it from the fintech perspective, fintech FIs. Check fraud on one hand. I don't know if it's still underrated. I think people have woken up again to the fact that A, there are checks still being used in the US, and B, it's a huge money loser for fintechs today. And close competition with first party fraud, friendly fraud for fintechs. I think fintechs don't know how to measure it, don't realize that it's even happening, confuse it with a lot of different things that may happen on their system, like credit defaults and third party fraud. So I think that's also a pretty big and scary abyss to look at that people haven't realized yet.
Excellent. So in the US, we still use checks, and both businesses and individuals use checks. And last year, reviewing some of the data around check fraud, 52% of all fraud losses were attributed to check fraud. So yeah, check fraud is definitely a threat that is still out there. Now, we spoke about memes earlier, and I know you don't remember all your memes, but the question is, if you had to pick one meme, a funny meme that taught you a real lesson, what would that be?
Just because I talked about the Undertaker meme earlier, I had another one also with WWE where they had these in the 90s. They had these like big, I think it was called Royal Rumble events where they would
Royal
put
Rumble, yeah.
people, into the ring and they would all fight. It would be extravagant and ridiculous and so. And I had one like that kind of like compared that to how vendors are trying to like win over customers in MRC. And that cracked me up like 10 times in a row when I was editing it. So yeah.
I'll see if I can find that and add that video, overlay that video, but that'll be funny. Okay, last question. One thing that fraud prevention teams must stop doing during this quarter.
Wow. Stop looking outside for solutions. I think many fraud teams are, to a degree, let's say cutting themselves some slack by saying, yeah, we need more resources, we need a new tool, we need a new vendor, we need more money, we need, instead of trying to approach the problems that they can solve in a, let's say, more hacky way in a lot of organizations that won't fly, but sometimes if you can solve a problem of a million or two that you're losing at the moment, and this is not like the most scalable or long-term solution ever, maybe you still want to solve a million or two for your company, and that would be a great win for everyone. And I think a lot of organizations that I speak to just don't have these kind of like muscles to think outside of the box. What are the tools that they have right now? What are the skills that they have right now, and how they can utilize those to solve their problems instead of just like going after the next shiny tool.
Excellent. I couldn't agree more. And you did brilliantly in the rapid fire. Kudos to you.
That's my
And
score.
I have to say thank you so much for making time today and joining me for this discussion. And I will request all my listeners to also subscribe to Hen's newsletter. The links will be in both the LinkedIn post and also the show notes. So if you're listening to this on Spotify, or if you're watching this on YouTube, you will find all the useful links in the show notes for you to read and subscribe. Please do so. And again, thank you so much for joining. Any last words? Anything you want to share before we log off?
No, just thank you too for having me. It's been a ton of fun, and let's do it again sometime.
Excellent. Thank you, Han. Thank you so much. And
My pleasure.
everyone, it's a wrap on this one. We'll be back again with another episode, another A-lister. Until then, bye.